heads, and that's about it. Because that hasn't been getting logged, and it includes for myself. I kind of took it for granted that I grew up and these places were here, and I'm so busy studying Eugene Jarvis's backstory and the history of Pac-Man and that sort of thing that I didn't even stop to realize that kind of homegrown stuff, that's awfully important, because that was that first culture of video gaming. That was that whole thing where we see that Dig Dug machine out at the door there. I remember the places I saw Dig Dug as much as I remember Dig Dug. I remember it being at the Electric Cowboy Casino on the left side in between Frogger and Gorf. And it was at the Safeway, along with Pac-Man, that had, for some reason, a joystick that was sunk so far down, it was just kind of a little ball just like on the control panel, and they never fixed the damn thing. I remember seeing it at, the Empire Video Arcade, and I remember the day where I guess somebody had bought it, they'd moved it out, and they were about to load it on the truck, and it was sitting on the sidewalk, plugged in, and with credits on it. So, like, I'm a kid, I'm eager, you see free credits on a video game, and that was like Christmas. Like, oh crap, I can save my quarters, let me go on. I start playing at the sidewalk, and the guy was like, hey, get off my game. But I was kind of mad, because they'd had that thing in there until probably 89, 90. And I was about, at that point in time, it was the only place I could play Dig Dug. And I remember seeing a Dig Dug cabinet at a laundromat window, I want to say in the mid-90s, and then went inside just to play Dig Dug, and it was Trog. They converted it, they still did side art. But that's my point with this, is that right now is I continue and I do research all the time, and there is so much video game history that is, it's at risk of being lost. Right now, we're kind of at this pivotal moment where the world is finally starting to take genuine interest in this stuff, which is great. And events like this are popping up all over the place, and people actually want to talk to these creators and turn out to see them and all that sort of thing. And you finally have physical museums, you have historical efforts and preservational efforts going on, but at the same time, we've lost some of our early pioneers. And a lot of them, they're not getting any younger. And there's a lot of stories that they haven't told yet. There's a lot of things that I find physical things that I found prototype games that nobody's ever heard of. I found discs for something called 3DO University, and no one anywhere knew. I had to go to Trip Hawkins to figure, to find out what it was. The guy that founded the 3DO company is the only person that could tell me. If he wasn't still around, nobody would know much about that. But at least that stuff can still be diggable. That these neighborhood arcades, it's almost tragic, because we will remember those days and people will talk about them, and people will always remember Aladdin's Castle, and people will remember Tilt, people will remember the chains, people remember when 7-Eleven had arcades in them. But people, that one little arcade that was in the neighborhood or it was in the corner, and now, some of y'all are, what's in the, you mentioned your arcade, what's in that space now?
Bathrooms.
Bathrooms.
Couldn't find my lease space.
So someone's taking a leak where you used to play Galaga. That's what's yours? What is it now?
I don't know. I don't live there anymore, but I think it had gone back to being a dry cleaners years later, and now I think it might be like storage or a warehouse. I have to look it up.
So like some of the ones I mentioned, Electronic Cowboy Casino, there's a bike repair shop, Nickelodeon, which was nearby it, was a karate dojo, and now it's split into like 2 or 3 different things. I think one of them is those like 99-cent knockoff stores. Empire Video Arcade is a place called Cigarettes Cheaper. And then I've gone out and about, I was out in LA a little while back, and I found that the arcade that was in War Games, the 20 Grand Palace. I know they say it's in Seattle in the movie, but that's what it is. It's actually in north of LA, and it's a boutique. It's a clothing, like a secondhand clothing boutique. Like they get high-end used clothing, and they didn't really care that it used to be an arcade and didn't know I was there. It's things like that. People don't realize that stuff was there. Sassany Arcade, downtown Los Angeles, finally closed. The big iconic sign got destroyed before they took it down. They smashed it to take it down, so it was because it was easier. So even things like that in the modern day, it's getting lost. So what I wanted to encourage people to start doing, and I've talked a little bit about this online, is those types of memories that you guys just shared with us here today, is don't be shy about writing that down, putting blogs on the internet to talk about it, or making videos and trying to recall it and being detailed and talking about it. And if you have a library that can do it, or you have the time, or you have access to it, go to them and start looking through their archives and look through these microfiche and look through that stuff, because a lot of times the online archives won't even go back that far. And start recording that and getting it down, because when I did go to that library and wanted to look for video game stuff in the archives, they tried to say there's a shortcut. Well, you can use this to go to where you can find some of this stuff, the important topics. No one thought video games were an important enough topic to log it. So day by day, month by month, year by year, as time allows, which is not something I have much of these days, is time. So, but I've been trying to get that, and I wrote an article about it on scholarlygamers.com. It's one of the sites that I contribute to when time allows. And an amazing thing happened with that. I wrote about this type of topic, and I talked about my old hometown one, hoping, if nothing else, if you type that in, it'll come up on a Google search now, right? You know, and maybe something will come up. And I wrote about one of the ones in Denton called Michael's Game Room. And that seems to be the hottest one that was back then. And they had the neatest ads, and they had ads of someone playing Donkey Kong and someone playing Miss Pac-Man, and they gave you a t-shirt and tokens if you got straight A's. If you set the house high score, they gave you another shirt. I'm trying to find these shirts now in town. They gotta be there somewhere, right? No luck so far. But, and it was right by Denton High School, so apparently everybody went down there. And I wrote the article, and it did very well, and it seemed like it started to encourage some people to start trying to talk about their stuff, which, again, like I said, that's what I want to encourage everyone to do, and you guys tell everybody else, because otherwise this is going to go away. This will go away when we go away if we don't start doing this now. And no one will ever fully understand what was. But the owner, the former owner of Michael's Game Room, actually got forwarded the article, and he reached out to me. And because of me talking about it like that, first of all, I got to ask him tons of questions. And interestingly enough, it turns out that I had read an article about something that they had made a multi-board of original games in 1983. And he sold a few apparently around DFW and that sort of thing. He never got into mass production because the bank didn't want to give him the money, because video games were dying, right? They didn't want to give him the money. So we never got to mass produce it. And talking to him, I was like, dude, I read that in an old Playmeter, didn't I? In an old Playmeter magazine, I found it. So I had actually read an article about this guy and had never known. So yeah, it came full circle. But the beautiful thing about it is that he kept memorabilia from his arcade. He has photos, he has paperwork, he even has the prototype of that multi-machine that he built in a garage. I think he said it was Arkansas. He's out of the country. When he comes back in, I'm taking a road trip. He kept this stuff, and he was so happy that it came up, because he was afraid too that the history of what he did there in that neighborhood arcade was going to be lost forever, and was so thrilled to find out that somebody was actually looking into it and talking about it. And somehow too, you know, a little town, and apparently he had games like iRobot and Journey and stuff like that, Discitron, Cliffhanger, some pretty rare games. And they were in this little town, this little arcade. It's now like a Thai restaurant in Denton that would just, I think there's a salon in the back part of it. It's like two different businesses. So because I did that, some of that turned up. And maybe if more of us do that, and more of us do that, maybe more of this stuff can start turning up before it's too late to really do it. So, you know, I'm always encouraging this sort of thing with any video game research, is to just don't go off of just what you see on the internet, don't go off of just what you see online or on some movie or whatever, but to actually, when you can get old books, old magazines, whatever, talk to someone who is in the industry and really start to learn and try and share what you learn so it can live. I think this is one of the most endangered pieces So a lot of times, much like he was saying before, and since it's one of a small shroud, this might go kind of quick. I like to get a little more audience involvement. If there's any questions or comments or anything about what we're talking about here, throw them at me, and let's see which direction it goes. You, sir.
Are you working on a book or anything, or something
One of the things I hesitate to do right now is make concrete plans, because every time I do, my research and everything takes me in another direction. 3 years ago, I wouldn't have thought I was amassing a big archive of vintage magazines and books until I found a big giant archive of it all at once and bought it and realized that almost everything I was reading in these magazines was not talked about ever anywhere on the internet. A completely different narrative on the internet existed than what these magazines said actually happened. And then 2 years ago, if you asked me if I was raiding the attics and barns and warehouses full to find old console games, so he's nodding. He follows me on social media. I come away with truckloads of this stuff. I wouldn't have thought so, but I keep learning things as I do more research. I've considered a book. A couple of years ago, I actually said I was going to do one. But I don't know, these days it might not be the best way to do that type of content. Maybe I need to do a documentary. I've had a TV show stuck in development for 5 years too, so maybe at the time I'm 80, it'll actually happen. It seems to be how that business works. I mean, Brian Collin talks later, he's talking 7 years for that Rampage movie to get made. 7 years, and they got hundreds of millions of dollars. So, but ultimately what I'm trying to do with all of this information is put it out and have an archive. I've been putting this archive together and have it exist. We have physical museums and things like that, and that's great, but I want what I'm doing to be sort of a reference source for people, eventually for people that want to do research, that want to do that real hard research and fact checking. Because you get that with baseball, you got people you can go to for movie history, stuff like that. Video game history is still kind of spread out. And you might get a display somewhere and it might be great to see all these rare consoles and stuff like that, but you don't get the context. So, and I'm hoping maybe that now to have a whole thing on the neighborhood arcade, and I'm kind of still in the experimental stage. I think actually the first person that's going to get to really explore the archives is this young lady right here. So she's going to be kind of a test on that. She's going to get the extremely disorganized early version of what I'm trying to do here. But we'll see how it goes. I'll learn from it, in my own way too.
Go ahead.
Oh.
You can go.
Kind of an observation, I want to see what you found of this, is like nobody thought to take pictures back then, right? Because you had to get, pictures were for special events, you had to pay for it.
No, absolutely.
Time, right? But now, everything's documented all the time.
Well, absolutely.
With the phone. Are you finding that some people had the foresight to take a lot of pictures and document this?
No, that's the problem, and I've run into it with my own adventures coming up in gaming as well. Because I don't think that even the younger set understands sometimes. There are probably more pictures have been taken of this event while we've been doing this panel than were taken of some arcades and the entire existence that they were there. I mentioned Aladdin's Castle. Aladdin's Castle was huge. Everyone had an Aladdin's Castle. And where I grew up was in Garland. The Aladdin's Castle in the adjacent city of Mesquite was the Aladdin's Castle that fought with the city of Mesquite all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. It was a big case that no one seems to remember anymore. But it was a big deal, big thing of national attention. It went on for years and years and years. And I cannot find a photo of that Aladdin's Castle. I can find articles, but I don't find pictures. And I know from my own experience, and I've had some of those internet types, that if I say this guy is blue, they're going to insist that it's orange for whatever reason. Challenge me on it, saying, well, you say this and this and this, where are the pictures? No one took that sort of thing back then. My parents did not support how much I love video games. And I don't think I saw a camera in my dad's hand until he was in his 60s. My mom was a photographer, and she hated this video game stuff. She was not going to take pictures of me in an arcade. She didn't value that, right? For her, the valuable thing was we went and saw some random thing that I was completely passionateless about. Or, here's an Easter